In early 1930s, a small boy by the name of Robert Attinger found a passion in science fiction and, with his futuristic mindset, believed that anti-aging would become a possibility in his lifetime. He would soon be deemed the father of cryonics and aspired to live in a world where sickness was a thing of the past and where death was voluntary. He wondered if freezing could be an alternative to your usual funerary service in hopes to conquer mortality. The concept of cryonics is explored within the article titled Cryonics, Hype, Hope, or Hell, published on the 23rd of November 2016 by The Conversation. Cryonics involves the preservation of an entire deceased corpse by preserving it in extremely low temperatures, and this is what we'll be exploring in our documentary today. Many scientists consider this to be a fake science due to its health and ethical implications, along with no given success rates in the past. This practice should not be confused with cryogenics, which involves freezing materials at extremely low temperatures rather than entire corpses. Now, cryopreservation is a quite complicated procedure and involves several steps before the main procedure even takes place. The following short clip displays the initial processes that occur in Alcor, one of several cryopreservation institutes located globally.
Alright Max, let's imagine that I have terminal cancer and my days are counted. I come to you and we have already done all the paperwork and signed the contract. What happens next?
Well, if we have advance warning, as we have in the majority of recent cases, we'll send a standby team out, which as the name implies means they come and they stand by and wait until clinical death has been declared, which is of course not the same as biological death. It's essentially today's doctor saying, there's nothing much more I can do for this patient. Maybe I could actually revive them for a while, but they're just going to die again. So at that point, the standby team goes into action. Suppose we're in a hospital or a hospice. As soon as clinical death has been declared, within seconds, we'll lift the patient, put them in an ice bath like this. Actually, in a remote location, it would be a lighter version of this one. This is more for local cases. We'll cover the patient with ice externally to begin external cooling. We'll take over respiration. We'll restart circulation by essentially, it's just like doing CPR, except this device also has suction as well as pressure downwards. So we're restarting everything, essentially. And at the same time, we're administering a whole series of medications, 16 of them in all. The first one of which is propofol, because even though the person's been cold dead, that doesn't mean they're not going to wake up again, because there's not some sharp line. People can come back from that. So the first thing we do is to ensure they don't regain consciousness temporarily, because you wouldn't want that during the procedure.
Following this, a selection of medicines are administered to the corpse. One of these is antacids, which is essentially a collection of bases that neutralize stomach acid by reacting to form salt and water. In this procedure, a stable pH is ensured after death. Following this, the dead body is then injected with anticoagulants, which help to stop blood clotting, a natural process that could inhibit following procedures. After the blood has been successfully drained from the body, a cryoprotectant solution is perfused within the corpse, causing it to travel through the lymphatic system and essentially replace the role of blood. The solution has been specifically validated in order to preserve the structural integrity of the brain, debatably the most important organ in the body. The cryoprotectant solution then initiates a process known as vitrification to occur within the body. Now, this is where things get interesting. Contrary to popular belief, the cryoprotectant solution doesn't freeze the tissue, but instead vitrifies it. Essentially, the crystallization that occurs during ordinary freezing is not witnessed during this procedure, thereby ensuring that the structural integrity of the cells is maintained. Isn't that crazy? Finally, the body is put in a sleeping bag and stored in a tank of liquid nitrogen at -196°C for long-term care.
In terms of demographics, those who await death remains that is not due to natural causes will predominantly be impacted. Chronically ill patients who have contracted a disease that may be curable in the future are more likely to see this as an appealing method. Additionally, this process is extremely expensive, costing up to $200,000 for whole body cryopreservation, and therefore most likely only viable to those with higher status.
But the underlying issue still remains. Is it even legal? A 14-year-old girl by the name of J.S. was a cancer patient and looked to have her body cryonically preserved after her death. She was hopeful that one day when doctors found a cure to her disease, that she could be resurrected and live the rest of her life. After the situation was considered by a judge, J.S. won the right to have her body cryonically preserved. The judge did demand, however, the need for new legislation related to cryonics, as his decision was based off an act related to the preservation of only sperm and embryo cells.
Ethical concerns are also raised by the issue at hand. Let's assume that by some miracle, scientists are able to bring her back to life. Then what? She'll be left without a family, without a social life, without anyone to look over her? Who's going to account for that? In some minds, this practice clearly violates the way of nature and can be perceived as artifice.
In addition, the price mentioned before further shows how the method will only be accessible to the very rich, and lower classes with lower wealth may not have access, leading to further disparity within society.
Now you may be wondering, now that we have cryopreserved the body, what happens when it comes in the freezer? The answer is, we don't know. Many scientists presume that the body will fall apart instantly as a result of the sudden change in the environment. However, some scientists believe that with advanced nanotechnology, the revival of the body would be possible. The idea is that such microscopic molecular instruments would make their way into the damaged cells and tissues and repair them simultaneously. However, this is based on the presumption that these tools could one day repair not only the damage caused by freezing, but also the damage that caused death.
So, are there any similar practices to cryonics that are viable to achieve immortality? Well, there is always the option of neurocriopreservation, which involves cryopreserving only the head of the individual. This is based on the theory that only the information stored within the brain is of any good, and that the brain could always be placed in a new clone of the body, or another body altogether, who knows. But, you may ask, doesn't only preserving the brain make the revival more tedious and make cryonics less likely to work? And while this may be true, the alternative is much cheaper than whole body cryopreservation and is therefore affordable by the lower class as well. Furthermore, the disease that the person may have been suffering will actually affect multiple areas of the body, and some damage might be irreversible. Therefore, it could be considered as a much better option if the brain is replaced into a new healthy body, offering a better life for the individual.
Now, let's talk about how gene modification can fit into cryopreservation. The Cryonics Institute has archived a title exploring a group of Chinese scientists that experimented with embryos by modifying their genes using CRISPR, an advanced gene editing tool. They did this in such a way that allowed for them to research the effects of an immune cell, known as CCR5. Whilst only 4 out of 26 genetic modifications were successful, it brings about the idea of a breakthrough. What if human embryos were modified in a way through which they could carry a gene corresponding to antifreeze properties? Mind you, many animals such as the Arctic ground squirrel already exhibit this quality, and creates the potential for this gene to be extracted and infused into embryos. Whilst this idea is entirely hypothetical, it could revolutionize the very branch of cryonics, as humans could grow and evolve in such a way through which they could survive freezing temperatures with ease.
The field of cryonics is definitely an iffy one at best. Whilst the practice itself is somewhat successful, it may not mean much if the body cannot be revived. Additionally, many ethical issues are raised by this practice. While some favor this method, others view it to be needlessly expensive or defying the laws of nature. Could it be the start of something revolutionary? Or is it a needless practice which we are wasting time and effort on? I'll leave that out there for you to decide.